So nice to be with you again. And special thanks to Chowa, who's put up with my rather delayed responses to all of his emails, and for your patience with me. Well, it has been, what can we say? We're now living in interesting times. Still going through it. I work at Kaiser for my day job. So we're expecting yet another surge in the next couple of weeks. So don't give up your masks. Keep washing your hands and don't touch nothing, because it's not gone yet. Hopefully this next variant won't be too bad, but who knows? There are mixed messages. So I really do appreciate hearing the dedications for the victims of COVID and racial inequality. It was so nice that that's been added to your morning services. And it's been a while. I think it was probably since the last time I was with you when I chanted the Gata Sweet Nectar. Such a beautiful chant. And I was noticing that one part where the last end, the Gospel for transference of merit, it even says, my own being, friends, enemies, family, and community. So we've, invited those that we may disagree with, which this is, since it was the first talk I gave was about a little bit about racial inequality, and it's something that I never talked about, so I hadn't talked about much before that talk. So this may be kind of part two of that same talk, since you made me think about it. And it was a good thing for me to certainly move into my own awareness and vocabulary, because I've been very privileged and not experienced much of that myself, but certainly see it and certainly read about it and understand how it works. So we in the when I say we in the United States have been very good at creating systemic racism. And the question comes up often, especially at my job, because I sit on the diversity committee, is what do we do about it? Unfortunately, what we tend to do with things that we don't like is we push them away. We marginalize them. We want them not to be seen. We want them to be different. We want to not face them. And that's unfortunately what we did with racists. I mean, they basically went into hiding, and anyone who avoided doing anything that might identify them as being racist. So they just kept it to themselves. And once things go into shadow, they gain their own kind of strength. The opposite of that is bringing all these things into the light, which I kind of talked about in my last talk about inviting the racists to the table. There are all kinds of ways to open that dialogue up and really make it a safe place for people of very diverse and divergent opinions and beliefs to have conversations, and possibly have those difficult conversations about those things that separate us, but then to get to the conversations about what we have in common and what we want to achieve. So this idea has kind of spawned a new idea in my head. And as you know, anything that is, becomes an idea is dangerous, delusional, and can potentially be weaponized. My cat wants to join the talk. Say hello, Chloe. But I think that there's, in as much as we can create systemic racism, we can also create systemic compassion. And when I use the term systemic, I'm talking about embedding it in our everyday activities, how we behave, how we interact, how we live, without separation. So it goes beyond that idea of a concept or a slogan, as oftentimes these things become, whether it be, white power or Black Lives Matter. Those are very charged slogans, but what do they mean? How do they show up in your life and in your everyday life? So this is just a shameless plug for our practice. I'll just put it that way, because I think that what this practice is the practice of systemic compassion. Uh, if you speak Buddhism, it's expedient means. That's really how it works out, and it's the idea, it's the actual experience of compassion before thought, so that the precept as the compassion as a precept instead of as a set of rules or a set of definitions, because we once it gets defined or put into policy, and I worked in corporate America for it's 36 years that I've been with Kaiser, and then I was with a different hospital 10 years before that. So uh, policies invariably do not take care of every situation, and they really they get weaponized. So that's what ideas or concepts end up doing. So compassion as a system that brings us together has to be something that happens before thought, before we realize it's the direct experience of compassion and the direct action that comes out of that experience of compassion. Um, the and You're already doing it. You're already engaged in a practice that systematically erodes away any ideas and concepts you have of the self or yourself, of any idea and concepts you have of separation, that things are different based on any sort of categories, of any ideas of prejudice. And it also takes care of those things that you want to call good and hang on to, or bad and push away, that they all become an inextricable, unseparated oneness that we all live in and take care of, just as we are, just as it shows up. And it can't be, because policy tends to be um, applied to everyone across the board. As a matter of fact, the body of laws, employment law, which is where I get involved, requires that you have a policy, you have policies and rules that are applied equally to everyone across the board. And that doesn't work either. There's so many times when there are people who come into my office, because I work on the dark side of HR. The recruiters they're the people who make people happy and give them jobs. I work on the employee relations side, so I see them when they're in trouble. So I summarize that as, the recruiters, they take them in and I take them out, because by the time they get to me, it's they've been not very good employees. So, and usually it's because they've tried to not follow a policy or follow the policy in a way that they believed it should be followed, and it resulted in something that caused harm. So policies are in and of themselves are potentially problematic. They have the good and bad aspects of it. So I'm not talking about creating a system of policies. I'm talking about practicing within ourselves such that we have the direct experience of compassion for ourselves, and then that experience extends to all sentient beings automatically. If you do this practice, if you sit down on the cushion and follow the rules, you will invariably see your true nature. You don't have to try. You don't have to put any effort into it other than getting to the cushion and sitting down and breathing. It happens because this is a system. It's a systematic way of peeling away those things that are not allowing you to see your true nature. And sometimes seeing that true nature or getting through those layers is painful and difficult. Thus, we have teachers who are there to help us through that. And sometimes we have these fantastical ideas that occur to us in these moments sitting on the cushion, And that's why we have teachers to kind of tell us that, that's not real either. Go back and sit down. But to really get to the heart of what your true self is, what true nature is. Um, Koan study is another way that systematically peels away all the ideas that we have of separation. It's like that the many facets of the jewel and Indra's net. Yes, they are all holding on to the same thing, the one net, but there are millions and millions of ways of dealing with it, and those give you this rather broad vocabulary to deal with people as they are. Because unlike policies that are the same for everybody across the board, systemic compassion or expedient means must be applied, where that must be, you must meet the people where they are. And that is going to be completely different every single time for every single person that you're dealing with. And it's the idea of, it's the work of practicing to the point that you have now embodied this practice, and that your way of responding is direct and before thought as a precept. That's the work that happens. So I have to kind of, and maybe I'm shamelessly plugging this practice because this is my 30th year anniversary of formal practice. So truly, Seisan Roshi and I met 30 years ago this year. I found myself at the doorstep of Zen Center Los Angeles Labor Day weekend, so coming up in September, for my first ZMI class. And it was in that class that, and this is 1992, so this is right after the LA riots. It was a major changing, earth-shattering, and all about racial equality and inequity, event that took place, and just completely destroyed the city in many ways. And so, for those of you who've never been to ZCLA, it's right in Koreatown, right near the flashpoint of where the riot started. So truly, the people at ZCLA were directly experiencing this upheaval, and quite, it had quite a profound effect on I think everyone who was in LA or around the world at the time. And we've seen many more of those, since then. Obviously, we haven't, solved this problem. And in my mind, I think we're, our need to create safety and comfort for ourselves has helped to, create more of this inequality, because we push things away instead of facing them and bringing them out into the light. I think that we are responsible, those of us who participated in the activity, of saying, no, we have to have a policy that says you don't do this. And I sat in many committees developing those policies for Kaiser, and knowing full well that this was just not going to, certainly I see how you have to, in a office setting, you have to have rules and guidelines and appropriate boundaries. But that helps on a very superficial sense, but it doesn't get to the root of the problem. It doesn't help. And so the cry of people who are experiencing any kind of discrimination is, in Kaiser, is that they come to my office and they say, well, you need to fire my manager because they're discriminating against me for whatever reason. And it's true that Kaiser has zero tolerance for discrimination, but zero tolerance doesn't mean that we fire everybody for it. It just means that we stop the behavior in whatever way necessary. If we're in a situation where it's not going to help to keep the person there, then yes, we will terminate them, and they move on. But the only thing that does is move that same problem to another employer. And I'm acutely aware of that every time I engage in the investigations and the process and the legal reviews of the terminations that I do, I realize I'm not solving the problem. I'm pushing it off. Instead of bringing it in and taking care of it and listening to it, uh, I say, go on your way, take your bigotry to another employer who will do whatever they do with it. So this is the opposite of that. This is actually embracing, first of all, within ourselves, because I have to admit, as an African American, male, our parents are usually, my parents were very good at inoculating me against what would happen to me as I went out into the world. So I basically was taught that, all white people are prejudiced. So, which is, prejudice in and of itself. So that's some behavior that I had to unlearn. And I can tell you, in the first ZMI class, there was someone in that class, because I can't remember who it was. He was an attorney, don't remember the name. He taught the class, and there was another person in the class at the time. And he went around the room and he said, well, why are you interested in Buddhism? And we all gave whatever answers they gave, and I don't remember what I said. But he got to one guy in the room, and he said, well, I like Buddhism because Buddha is white. And it didn't register, it didn't bother me at the time. Because I was, very skillfully inoculated by my parents and fully expected that, white people were going to say things like that. So I just dismissed him and said, racist, and I moved on. Well, someone at the center found out that happened, and there was all kinds of concern, and because they were like, are you okay? How was your class? And I was like, it's fine, it was great. It didn't even faze me for a minute. I did notice that the guy who made that comment, I never saw again. So I'm not sure what happened with him, but that was the beginning of my practice at Zen Center Los Angeles, and people were very concerned, especially at that time, since it was right on the heels of the LA riots, that Zen Center is not the place where that kind of behavior is at all tolerated. But it is the place where we can compassionately hear and listen and be with and heal those types of opinions, because we have the practice that allows us to extend compassion even to our enemies, as the gate of sweet nectar says. In that chanting, this becomes part of your vow to invite the enemies to the table, to have those conversations with them, and to extend compassion. So, and the other idea about compassion is that it's nice. You're being nice to people if you're being compassionate, and I don't think that is at all true either. Because again, once it becomes an idea, that becomes a policy, it becomes a position, you now have to defend it. And that just, then it breaks down into all kinds of mess as a result. But as an expedient means, is that action and that experience, that direct experience before thought, compassion will be what it needs to be in the situation to result in causing the least amount of harm possible. It's ahimsa. And sometimes that means that you have to, remove from the space that which is causing that harm, and take it someplace else where it can be appropriately addressed. Sometimes it calls for it to bring the problem into the light and let it be exposed. Let everyone really look at it and because if you're looking at it out there, this practice teaches you that there is nothing separate from yourself, that you are looking at it within yourself. And that's where it has to start, is with this practice. So the one of my favorite poets, 13th century, I'm sure there are many people who know Rumi, he said, the cure for the pain is in the pain. So instead of running into it, and those of you who've done any long periods of session or even zazen know that it is often very uncomfortable sitting and being with yourself, because you're facing nothing but yourself. There are times that we get to that so-called bliss and repose that Dogen talks about in the Fukazazengi. But getting to that bliss and repose often requires that within your own being and head, you go through Worlds War I, II, and III, while you're sitting on a cushion. That's what sashimi will do for you. But it is a fight worth having, because the other side of that is extremely amazing. Um, Otherwise, I would not have done this and been on this cushion probably almost every day. There's probably been a few days missed, almost every day for the past 30 years, because it works. It works to strip away those things that get in my own way, get that cause me to separate, that cause me to not acknowledge that we are all one, indeed, and that one is not bothered by difference and diversity, because the one is infinite. So there are differences and diversity that are the one as well, and to be able to really experience that is just an amazing thing, and that will also happen. Just sit down and breathe. That's all it takes. You have to do nothing more than engage in this practice, and this practice is already systematic in and of itself. It's a process, and the result is systemic compassion. No, and I don't think it's the only way to get there, because the next question that I ask myself is, what does this mean? I want everybody to choose that's pure for everything. The answer is no. I think there are many paths up the mountains. There are people of all faiths and who recognize our oneness and extend compassion to their enemies. But I think I spoke last time, and now I'm not remembering the gentleman's name, who actually befriended members of the KKK, and as a result of him doing that, of sitting down and listening and talking and dialoguing directly with these former diehard KKK Klansmen, gave up their robes and gave their robes to him. So last I read of him, he had somewhere around 200 Klansmen's robes in his collection, and that's just one person at a time, to really extend compassion to people who had very strong beliefs that cause separation and cause harm. What an amazing bodhisattva he is. If anybody knows his name, remind me what that is. I can't. I didn't look it up. So that's my latest ranting. Is we are already doing a practice that creates systemic compassion. Now, how do we spread this? How do we get people to come to their own way of doing this? We don't, there's this kind of anti-proselytizing culture within Buddhism, especially Zen. It's very difficult to describe our practice, because people will ask, "Oh, so do you believe in any religion?" I said, "Well, I have meditation practice," and they'll say, "What is that?" And I'll tell them it's Zen meditation, and then I'll kind of very succinctly describe what that is, and they look at me, and some of them will like go on to the next subject, because it just goes, it just goes right over their heads, because it sounds kind of simple and kind of boring, and they think, oh, another, foo-foo la-la meditation person who doesn't do anything. But those of us who actually do this know how profound this practice is. It sounds simple. It is simple in concept, but the effects of it are just beyond words, are beyond description, and are in and of themselves, to put it in Christian terms, the balm in Gilead, that heals the soul, if there is one. So here we are, in the midst of this pandemic, and this is I'm going to say fourth or fifth surge that we're headed into yet another one. And now this is another level of compassion that I've had to learn to really extend to people, because in health for healthcare workers, any of us working in hospitals, and I'm sure there are people on the call on the Zoom who do that, were required by the state of California to be vaccinated and to have boosters. So the majority of where the hospital where I work, complied with that, but there was a small percentage of anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers and anti-boosters that had all kinds of various reasons for not wanting to participate in that. And it was it was kind of difficult, especially for my staff who had to listen to these people complain about being made to do something they didn't want. And I basically had to kind of reframe it for myself. They're like coming in, what's wrong with these people? Blah. I'm like, okay, stop, take a breath. There's nothing wrong with these people. When was the last time you liked being told what to do? And no one does. Especially if you're being forced to do something that you don't want to do, you're going to find all kinds of reasons to not do it. That just makes this percentage of people normal, and just accept them as that this is something that they don't want to do, and they're being forced to do it, and the threat is that they will lose their jobs, and indeed several people have, because they can't work in healthcare without a viable exemption or having had the vaccine. So these are people whose lives have been drastically affected by COVID, first of all, by whatever it is they've decided to believe in, to allow them not to take the vaccine and booster. They've now lost their jobs, their income. They're not going to be able to get another job in healthcare in California. And it's not just them, it's their families that are affected by it. So this extends out, and everything that a person does extends out, and every act of compassion that we engage in also extends out. So that's what happens on the cushion doesn't stay on the cushion. It invariably will become part of your life, and kind of sneaks in sometimes. It's not always a conscious thing. You suddenly realize, well, I'm doing that because, or I'm more patient than I used to be, or I feel better than I did. I can I can sit longer this period than I was able to before. So there are all kinds of things that just sort of happen as a result of doing this practice, and it's well worth it, for the causes and effects that it has. But the more direct aspect of it is what's golden, is that it gets you out of your way, out of trying to identify and carry some kind of slogan around with you, to the point that you just meet yourself whenever you're encountering everybody else, and you automatically take care of what needs to be done. In the Shusa Hosen ceremony, there's a question that's asked by the officiate. They're handing the stick to the student, and the question is, how will you use this sword? And the answer is to give life and take it away. It's not or, it's both. So both sides of this sword, both sides of compassion, whether it be being patient and listening, or whether it be exiting that person off the premises, are both compassion, and everything in between fall under the rubric of compassion. But it's not because it's a policy, not because it's a rule, but because it's what needs to be done to cause the least amount of harm in that particular situation. And that becomes natural for you as a result of doing this. And that extends out. And then it becomes systemic in the rest of the world. So will we create world peace by doing Zazen? Probably not. But it's definitely worth the effort for those people that we do encounter, those situations that we do have to take care of, to work toward that, for first starting with ourselves. Because unless we are compassionate with ourselves, we can't be compassionate with anyone else. And unless we are practicing getting out of our own way, we won't know how to help those who are right there in front of us, who need us to take care of them. So again, shameless plug, the practice works. That's 30 years of wonderful practice with several of these teachers. It's nice to see Kyoshin worked, sat with her for a long time. Um, Actually taught one of her children piano, and I'm sure that he's now much older than I want to admit. And all these people that I've known for many, many years. Excuse me, losing my voice. Sawdust. I'm actually building a bunch of stuff in my house, so it's a little dusty in here. But what say you? How do you use compassion expediently? What is been in your experience of sitting for all these many, whether it be years or months or even minutes? This is your first opportunity.